We're back, and we're going to do a little history lesson now. You've heard the history of this company, but we're going to do a little bit of history of Metropolitans. So we're back with Paul, and he's going to give us some information. Do you know what the first year that Metropolitans were made?
They were first produced in 1954.
Okay.
And then the run ran actually through 1960.
Okay.
There are some that were titled as 61s and 62s.
Yep.
But basically they were ones that were at the end of the run that were left over. There's some debate as to whether there's technically a 61 or not. The chronology tells me there was, but I think pretty much they were basically 1960s that were left over.
Okay.
So.
Now, they were sold as Nash Metropolitans, but in fact they weren't entirely made in the United States, if at all, were they?
No, and that's the really fascinating history about this. It's the only car that I know of that was designed and engineered in America by Nash Motor Company,
Okay.
but 100% built in a foreign country, England, by Austin Motor Company.
Yeah. And
then every single one of them was exported back by boat to be sold in the United States.
Okay. So they were built completely overseas then?
Absolutely, 100%. The design, and if you look at them compared to the full-size Nash, they have some very similar characteristics. But the design was 100% Nash.
Okay.
Okay? And the reason behind it was pretty simple. In those days, you go back into the 50s, early to mid-50s, American cars were very large.
Yes, they were.
The larger the better, the extravagant the better. You know, bigger was definitely a whole lot better in those days. But George Mason, which became, he was with Nash and then became American Motors, had the idea that the time had come in America for second cars.
Yeah.
Most families had one car, and the time had come for a second car, and it was primarily designed for the lady in the house.
Okay.
Okay? And the other big reason why it went to England was that in America there were no manufacturing plants set up to make small cars. And to retool all of that for a small car, the expense would have just been exorbitant. So they went to Austin in England, who had a long history, a long running history of making smaller cars.
Right.
So they provided all of the mechanical aspects of it. Fisher Laidlaw of England did all the body work.
Okay.
But all designed to Nash specifications. It's pretty fascinating.
And they would have been, as far as being an American car, they would have been one of the first unibody construction cars.
Absolutely. Nash was very big on that at that point. Nash was actually producing unibody cars, but unibody cars in America, that was well ahead of its time.
It was, yeah.
Every other one that I know of was a frame-on, a full-framed car. This was a unibody, and they touted that as being superior construction, very strong, and it was.
Yeah.
It truly was. I mean, they were very visionary as far as having that in place.
Yeah.
Back at just a couple of tidbits on the history, if you don't mind going back to that a little bit. I was looking through some old Nash, actually Metropolitan advertising brochures that you would pick up at the dealer and newspaper articles. And one of the reasons why Nash wanted to pick this up is that they could sell a quote-unquote foreign car in America, but have the huge Nash network of dealerships to provide service for that. And that was one of their big selling points.
Yep.
There were other foreign cars available, okay, in America, but at times parts and service and so forth were an issue, and they touted that as a big plus, you know, that they could in fact service those in their own facilities, and were able to do that very well. And of course they had the Nash name behind it.
Right.
Now Nash and Hudson merged to become American Motors. Many of them are tagged as American Motors. That switchover occurred, I believe, in about 1955 or 56.
Okay.
The original cars were badged as Nash Kelvinator International.
Okay.
And they have a special tag that says that. That would be the 1954 and 1955 models.
Now you mentioned earlier that 54 was the first year.
Correct.
But on your site, I noticed that you have a couple of 53s.
Well, and again, the actual years, they actually did start producing them in '53, you know, the calendar year of '53, but
Right.
they were all titled as '54s.
Oh, okay.
This is where that came from. Another little interesting tidbit was in about 1957 or '58, Austin decided they would try and sell these cars in England.
Okay.
And they made right-hand drives, which are fascinating to look at because everything is totally backwards. But the fascinating part about that history is it was basically a total flop.
Really?
If you look at those cars, they were very Americanized. Bright colors, lots of chrome, lots of stainless steel, and that was way, way, way too flashy for the folks in England.
Okay.
They were used to driving, you know, basically your cars are available black or gray, and that's basically what they wanted. And it just did not work. But they were able to sell, the entire run approached 100,000 cars. It's 95,000 some odd, but it was pretty close to 100,000 cars.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what year did they add the trunk and then the wind wings and things like that? Were they all the same year, or were they a progression?
No, they were phased in about 1958, 59. Basically, the car was available from the beginning to end in just a couple basic configurations. In the 54 and 55s, all the years they were available as a hardtop and convertible.
Yeah.
In 1954 and 55, they were a single color. The body was a single color with mist gray on the roof and mist gray on the wheels. In 1956 is when they went to what most people remember the Metropolitan to be, the two-tone.
Yeah.
Okay, with pastel colors and white.
Right.
Okay, the stainless steel line that goes down the car, the white would have been in the bottom, the color would have been in the top, and then a white roof. And basically, the last big change was the addition of the trunk lid and the van windows.
This one is one of the older models, and we have perfect comparison right here. This one has no trunk lid on it, and it has no wind wings, as John told us. And the one next to it does have the trunk lid, and it does have the wind wing. So that's one of the ways of distinguishing. And I also noticed that this one has a three-piece rear window, and that one has a single-piece rear window.
And, you know, drivetrain engine, the extremely early ones had what they call the 1200A series engine with a mechanical clutch. Okay, and that was real super early cars had that. Then they went to a 1200cc and then to a 1500cc.
Okay.
Overhead valve,
Yeah.
standard American type engine.
And basically the same motor as you would get in an MG.
Correct, correct. You know, Austin, they didn't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
You know, the mechanics were things that they had available to them.
Right.
Well, the Metropolitan was originally designed, the initial models would have a 4-speed shifter on the floor.
Really?
Okay?
Did they actually produce any?
No.
No.
No. And it's a
Okay.
shame that they didn't,
Yeah.
because they would be a much better performing car.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating about the fact that they didn't do that is all of the cars in America of that era had a full bench front seat. There were no bucket seats.
Right.
And the standard transmission shift collars were what we commonly call a 3 on the tree,
Right.
3 on the steering column.
Yeah.
And they thought, no, we want this to be an Americanized car. People are not going to be dealing with bucket seats and a floor shifter, so they converted it over to 3-speed.
And yet Volkswagen incorporated both of those things and had no problem.
Exactly, absolutely.
The way people think, and sometimes trying to anticipate what the public is going to want and go for it.
Exactly.
You never know.
But they didn't want to portray it at all as a foreign